To some, a hobby is just a pastime. For many, it's a passion. And for yet others, can it be something else? Toastmaster of the evening, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guest. Among the several hobbies I have, the one that commands the larger portion of my money, if not the time, is the collection of antiques and other collectibles. I started collecting about 8.5 years back with classic cameras and antique telephones. Now, the word antique has a lot of definitions. I go by the guideline that anything that is beyond 100 years old is classified as antique, and below that I call it as classics or collectibles. Today in my collection I have several items including paintings, bronze items, porcelain items, miniature cars, etc. But my favorite happens to be Chinese porcelain. This little porcelain item here is actually a rice bowl, which is around 140 years old. And this is yet another flower bowl, which is more than 300 years old. And this actually is a shipwrecked piece, which means that 300 years back, it went down to the bottom of the sea, and quite recently it was recovered back, and you're looking at a piece of history. Now, the most obvious and common question that is presented to me is, how do you know? A very valid question indeed, and I must admit that it is not an easy answer, as it is equally difficult for people like us to decide whether it is true or not. Sometimes you get lucky, and like the shipwreck item I showed you, we do get a few items with certificates such as these. These are called as certificates of authenticity. However, not always is the case like that. So how do we identify? One of the common ways of identifying is looking for the rain mark. Looking for the rain mark. Now, what it means is, there was a custom of putting in this rain mark of the emperor or the dynasty from the period it comes from as a point of respect for the day, for the rulers of those days. But if you know how to look for a rain mark, the fakers know to put it there too, right? So it's not a reliable way of saying that, hey, I found an original one. So what do? One of the most essential things you need to have is your resources of books and other material, whereby reading over a period of years, you come to learn about the very many designs, the shapes, the colors, the techniques, and the right way of applying those seal marks that were applied in those days of the product that you're holding. Now, this is something that I definitely depend upon. The only scientific way of proving whether a product is true or not from a particular age is something called as a thermoluminescent testing. What they do is, there are only 2 or 3 places in the world where you can send it for that, and they dig about a small hole from the bottom generally, and this is sent for thermo, which is heat, and luminescent, which is light, testing. Now this costs you $900 per, but it is still not 100% guaranteed that it is going to be true. The method I rely on is A, learning, B, consulting with my peers throughout the world, and C, I have a little equipment which allows me to see through the walls of the porcelain. Now, when you see through the walls of the porcelain, what happens is, you see something like the bubbles that are formed within. Now, without getting into too much of technical details, what happens is, when you go to the older generation of the products, you find that the bubbles are evenly spread out and with big bubbles. Okay, because the technology that was used those days used to take time for the moisture to solidify. Whereas in the current days products that come, the bubble would be seen something like this. And obviously there are references from which I can see what period does this bubble pattern come from and what does this come from. This little baby here, believe me, is 1,000 plus years old, from the Song dynasty. And it is definitely one of my favorites. And among the collector world, anybody who sees it even as an image will recognize that it's a very original one. All 3 of these I've shown you today are 100% original, no questions about that. Now, collection is not just about antiques or about something that is necessarily very expensive. To me, anything beautiful, anything intriguing, anything rare is something I like to collect. Let me give you a few examples. Now, as you all know, stone by nature is opaque, which means light does not pass through. But here is a stone which is actually translucent, okay? It's not transparent, but it is translucent. A very, very unique and rare product. And I wonder if any of you could guess what these items are. Now, this is a wood-turned stone, which means that it has been lying under the earth's terrific conditions for at least 1 million years for this wood to be converted into stone. And this, interestingly, is a piece of lava. The volcano flows, the lava comes out, and eventually solidifies. And then it takes a certain chemical role, and obviously both shapes are handmade. Among my favorites, I would also like to share a couple of items where this, for example, is a 100-plus-year-old bead with Buddha's face and a little bit of Arabic, some letters carved on each of this. Now, what is unique about this is, if you can see the thread that goes through, the images of Buddhas are actually painted through the inner of those holes, and they're quite visible when you see them from the near place. And ladies here would probably find it interesting that this is a pendant, a stone pendant. Consider yourself wearing this in this meeting from the Neolithic period, okay? And here, probably one of my most expensive collections, though it is so small, is a bronze deer from the Bronze Age, which means it's around 5,000 years old. Well, collection is a hobby for me. That is an experience for knowledge gaining, for meeting my peers in various parts of the world, and